All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Sébastien Marquet. It's March 4th, 2025. We're at the Nicholson Library, Linfield University in McMinnville. Sébastien, thank you so much for joining us today. First question is, why wine?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm very humbled by being here at Linfield University. So, why wine? Well, that is a great question. I think, to me, it was the only option that I was clear in my mind when I was a young boy. My grandfather was and lived in north of Burgundy. My father was with him very often, going fishing and hunting in a small village at just the border of Champagne in the Burgundy region. And my grandmother was from Alsace, so all his name, was kind of in my head. And my grandfather had a small vineyard in the north of Burgundy, where he was, pruning vines in the winter and working the vines all year round to produce his own wine. So, at a very young age, I was interested by the viticulture and the winemaking, and I spent a lot of time with him in the vines. So it was kind of logical for me that vine and winemaking was part of my genetic, I would say.
So tell me about, as you started to grow up and started to kind of making decisions for your future, tell me about education and on from there. So,
very young age, I got sick with a leukemia, and I was not a very good student. I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I got behind the school system. I was behind all of my fellow friends at the same age, so I get very disinterested by the vineyard and by the school. So, and very interested by spending time outside with my grandfather. So, on the weekend, the only thing I wanted to do is be with him, going to the vines, and I found my place there. So at the young age of 14 years old, my parents realized that I had this passion of viticulture and winemaking. And lucky me, in Burgundy, we have a Lycée Viticole de Beaune, who is one of the best schools in France, who take young students. So they offered to me to go to the winemaking and viticulture school of the Lycée Viticole de Beaune, and at 14 years old, I was in boarding school to start learning, my craft.
What did you think about it when you got there?
Well, first, it's not easy to be in boarding school at 14 years old, so it was kind of intimidating to not be in the comfort of a home with a mother and a father and brother and sister around me. However, I really fell in love with my teachers, were a very great educator, and the school concept was fantastic because you have 4 hours of viticulture in the vineyard per week. You had 4 hours of wine tasting, at the school with a teacher. You had 4 hours per week of lab work where you learn to do your analysis. And not only that, but you have math and geography and all the other, classes normal for the other students. So I found my place, and I became one of the best students of my class because the passion, drove me to study, and I caught up with the school system.
So as you were going through the program, what did you foresee for your future? What did you think you would do after you got out of school?
Well, that is I didn't have a clear vision. We were doing a lot of internship in the same time. So you were spending 2 or 3 weeks in the local wineries, and then during the spring work, so working the young vines and removing suckers, and in the summer you were working and lifting the wire up and edging the vineyard. During harvest, in 1989, so I was in school already for 3 years. It was the first year where I was making wine with my internship, I would say vigneron hosting me. So in 1989, I made my first wine in Volnay.
And you were how old?
I was 16. and the gentleman Jean-Claude Cluzot was. He was not passionate by the winemaking, he was more passionate by the vineyard. So, and I was so passionate by winemaking, so he kind of dropped me in the morning at the winery, and he said, okay, I will bring the grapes in 2 hours, and then 2 hours later, I have a first load of grapes, and then I know how the machine works, so I was doing all the destemming and filling the tanks and starting, doing some, yeast inoculation and punch down, pump over, and I was in my happy place, and everything turned extremely well. So when Jean-Claude Cluzot was coming in the evening to see how the work was done, the winery was clean and smelling good with good healthy fermentation. So the day after he brought more grapes, and then I took the lead of the winery this year in 1989. And it was great because they were producing Volnay, Pommard, Meursault, Montely, all these very incredible name, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir focus, and Aligoté as well. So it was just incredible. So that was my first internship in 1989 as a winemaker. And in the winter, we have also internship in the vines to do the pruning. So I love pruning. I think it's where everything starts. So this is my journey with the Lycée Viticole de Beaune, and it was absolutely great experience to be hands-on, but also to learn the chemistry aspect of winemaking and the economics aspect of winemaking.
What were the biggest either surprises or challenges of making wine for the first time?
Well, it's always intimidating because you are working vines than other person worked the vine for hundreds of years. For me, was you are lucky to be able to carry on a tradition. Mm-hmm. You are lucky to be able to take care of a piece of land. It's not yours. Even the owner of the land have the same feeling. Then it's something you have to carry on to the next generation or the next person, because some people before you did the same work. So on the same piece of land, and that I think is very intimidating because you cannot, it's too heavy for a man to make a mistake at that time, and you have to be able to keep up to the standard that the piece of land need to be able to provide the best for us to enjoy.
So what came next after that?
Well, next after that, I needed to get my degrees. I would love to have stopped school at that point and go start working, but my parents were really like, no, you need to get your degrees. So I got all my degrees. I got my degrees in viticulture and winemaking, and after that, I went to another school where I realized that I needed a little bit more than just the technical aspect. I also needed some marketing and sales aspect. So I went to marketing and sales school to learn the other side of the industry. Production is absolutely gorgeous, but you can have the best wine in the world. If you don't know how to sell it, it's the worst wine in the world. So that was something very interesting, how to position your product on the market, and I learned a lot.
So at that point then, after having kind of seen all aspects of the industry at that point, what was your path forward? You mentioned your happy place, so what was next?
So next was simple. In France you have to do the army, the military. So I was drafted for a year, and that turned out to be a very incredible experience because I was sent to the Jura region, and I had to learn how to shoot and to do everything that the soldier need to do. But I decided to go to learn to become like a surgeon, so I went back to Dijon in Burgundy, and then the general of military section was a good friend with Jean-Claude Cluzot. And at this point, he said, "Oh my God, Sébastien, it would be great if you can take a military truck to get some wine at Cluzot." So I start organizing wine sales through the military organization. So I was selling wine to the military caserne, we call it in France. And so I was going there, I don't know, once a month to get a pallet of wine that I was selling from Jean-Claude Cluzot to the military general. And so I became a very good friend. And then army turned to be a wonderful experience because wine became involved with my 1 year service to the French military.
That might be the most French thing I've ever heard in my life. It's amazing. All right. So then coming out of the military.
So coming to the military, I went back to school again to learn more about marketing and sales. And then from there, I said, okay, what do I want to do with my life? So during all this time when I was in school or in the military, I was able to make wine every year. So I was lucky, even the military, because I was very good friend with a general. He let me go make wine for Cluzot in 1993 when I was in military. So it was a great experience. And from there, I said, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to stay in Burgundy and learn to become a winery owner or try to purchase a piece of land, and land is very expensive there, so it was very not possible for me. My grandfather, a small vineyard in north of Burgundy. At that time, the wine there was not very popular, and the piece of land was too small to support a family, him plus me, so it was not possible for me to stay there, or I could have found a job somewhere, but I was very I wanted to travel. I wanted to experience different type of varietal, different type of grapes, different type of weather condition, different type of terroir. So I started looking for different job. At that time, it was no internet, it was no Google, it was no wine business or wine job research. So you have to put your network in place. And I got a job as a general manager for a small, medium-sized wineries in the Languedoc-Roussillon. I was super young. I was not prepared for a position like that. I had all the degrees and tools in hand, but I didn't have any experience. So I became a general manager for the Domaine de Saint-Louis in a small village in South France, and it was absolutely an incredible experience because I was near the Mediterranean Sea, where they grow the oysters there. And the grape varietal, we have a lot of Carignan, we have a lot of Chardonnay and Merlot, and the owner of the winery was in Paris. He was not living on the property. So that was a great way for me to experience a different type of grape varietal. And we have a lot of Merlot as well, and some Syrah. So I learned so many different varietal with different weather condition in this area, and it was just beautiful with the Mediterranean sun and not the gray weather of a Burgundy region.
So being a general manager, obviously different kind of job. You're doing a little bit of everything. So you mentioned kind of being unprepared for it. What was it like to start there, and what were sort of the biggest obstacles or biggest learning curves for you?
Curiously, it was the biggest obstacle was being from Burgundy, you go to South France in the Languedoc-Roussillon and they treat you like a stranger, and I was speaking the same language, I have a different accent, but the challenge was to fit in with the population, the local population, and but after 6 months, I started meeting the people in the village, and the village kind of adopted me. And at that time, my biggest challenge was I was not speaking English, and the majority of the wine buyer from the Languedoc-Roussillon wine from the Domaine de Saint-Louis was American, and so they were coming to do some tasting with their distributors, and I was not able to communicate with them. So that was my biggest challenge, and at that point, I realized that English is a very important language. And in business of wine, because America is a big country, and you need to speak English to sell wine in the United States, and that was a big open call for me.
Did you, in a role like that, did you see that as something you wanted to continue doing, or were you anxious to get back into vines and wine?
I was doing both, because even as general manager on the medium-sized wineries in Languedoc-Roussillon, you have to be able to do the winemaking as well and viticulture. So I was attending vines every morning and prune. I was also doing all the winemaking and organizing bottling line, plus doing all the general management. You know, the price of the wine there is very low, so you have to have a multi-position with carrying different hats, you know, depending the job. The winery was doing extremely well. I got a 96 point from Robert Parker from one of the red wine we're producing on the property. So that was a big high for me in my career as well. I could claim that I got a score like that from Languedoc-Roussillon. It was not very well received at that time. So I was very proud of the work I've done there, yeah. And he was on the Mediterranean Sea. And I love the ocean and the sea. I also love sailing, and so that was great for me because I can do some windsurfing. I can go with some friend to do some sailing in the Mediterranean Sea. So it was the perfect location for me to be able to do my passion of sailing and my passion of winemaking.
We're going to come back to sailing a little bit, but tell me what happened next.
Next, I met a gentleman named Jean-Louis Roux. And Jean-Louis Roux explained to me that he produced the first melon, the fruit, in the Caribbean island. And it takes 60 days for him to grow a melon in the Caribbean island, instead than 120 days in the Languedoc-Roussillon. And that, for me, was completely incredible. Like, oh, tropical weather, no winter, so you can plant and harvest very quickly. And at this point I say, what about vines? Have you tried to plant a vine in the tropical weather like you do for your melon? And he said, yes, I try, and I am able to get fruit after 1 year and a half. So, and that kind of triggered some interest for me. So he became very successful with his melon. He was moving tons and tons and tons of melon between Santo Domingo and Martinique Island and Guadeloupe Island to the European market. And so I offered to him to plant vineyards. I said, well, we plant a vineyard and produce some grapes and try to see if we can produce more grapes in the wintertime and we can sell these grapes in Europe, in the wintertime. And he said, let's do it. So we planted 21 acres of vineyard in Martinique Island, in south of the island, where it's not too slopey and the weather is always more consistent than the north part of the island, where you have a volcano and the cloud get trapped and then rain often. So we planted 21 acres of pergola, that way the grapes can hang and the wind, the alizé, the wind from the South Martinique can drive a cluster. And so 21 acres of vineyard with 6 acres of wine grapes as well for experimentation. So the French government gave me the authorization to do experimentation for winemaking and also to sell the table grapes. So we have a lot of table grapes. I was producing around 50 tons of table grapes per year. All sold in 5 kilograms small box, and we were producing wine from the island. So that was an incredible experience because you can produce wine or grapes every 3 months and a half to 4 months per vines. So if you prune every month or every week, you can harvest every week and rotate your production constantly. So each vine is going to produce 2.5 times per year, 5 times every 2 years. So it was a learning curve in my career because you can make wine every month. So I did that for almost 9 years, 8 years and a half, yeah, almost 9 years. So the vine, obviously, aged 2.5 times faster. The pressure of disease is very important because you're on a tropical weather, so you have to really spray a lot. It's not like an easy challenge. However, I was able to produce the first wine in the Caribbean islands.
That's incredible. What was, I guess let's start with, you mentioned obviously like the fast forwarded timeline of things. If you're always always harvesting. What was that like to get used to being in that kind of production mode?
Well, it's very exhausting because there's never a break there. You know, the weather does not stop like we do have a break in the winter time. Yeah, there you when you walk your vineyard, you have all the stage, Bagolini stage we call it. You know, the winter bud, the green push, the cotton, and the green and first leaf, and after that you have a bloom, and after that you have veraison, and after veraison, you know, you have harvest time. So when you walk 100 yards in your vineyard, you have all the different stages at the same time. So it's non-stop. It's non-stop. You harvest your grapes, you wait 2 weeks, you remove the leaves. So the leaves after harvest become like crispy, like a potato chips, you know, with a salinity in the air. So you have to remove the leaves from your canopy, and then you prune, and you attach your cane to your wire in pergola. So you work with your arm up, and you attach your cane, and 1 week later you can see bud break again. So it's non-stop. So I put in organization. I have 11 employees at that time. I was super young, and I was not prepared. You know, the business was growing. I have grapes all the time. So I put like a market. So I was selling grapes to the local market. It's interesting in Martinique because in the Caribbean island, usually they offer grapes like they offer flour. So when they go visit somebody at the hospital, they are going to bring a little grape. And so for me, it was great to sell the grapes in the market because the people were receiving the grapes very well, and they were very sweet. And so they are always imperfect because, you know, you have bats and birds. But people are used in the Caribbean island. You know, fruit does not come perfect like we have here at Safeway or any other store. You know, it's a farmland in Martinique with tropical weather. All the local fruit are local market. So imperfection is acceptable. And so I was selling a ton of grapes in a, you know, local superstore, and I put also a system of sales of grapes on the beach. So I have about pickup truck with umbrellas and scales, and then I have a crew selling the grapes at the beach for the local tourists, and they were very well received. So it was very exciting.
That's amazing. So tell me about the wine grapes specifically. What did you plant, and how did it work?
So I planted the grapes named Italia, which are white grapes with fat berries. I planted a lot of Muscat of Hamburg as well, which is very aromatic. I planted a lot of Danlas with the grapes who have a more elliptic berry size with a pale skin. The skin is supposed to be a little thicker, so more resistant to the sunlight. I tried to bring some seedless from America because it was not legal in France, but the French government refused the import of seedless for, you know, sanitization and issues. So I could have tried, but with some very heavy process of, you know, disinfection for the vine. And I brought some, but they died during the disinfection system. So I was not able to put any seedless grapes. It was the red blush. This is the one I tried to import at that time from the US, but I was not able, no successful French government regulation. And also after that, I have 5 acres or 6 acres of wine-making grapes. So I had some Grenache, I have some Syrah, I have some Sauvignon Blanc, some Chardonnay. I even had some Viognier and Merlot. So it was interesting because I could produce wine for experimentation, but the French government didn't give me the authorization to sell my wine at that time. So I kind of stuck because I was a winemaker more than a fruit grower. And it was great to make the money with the fruit market. However, the passion was in the winemaking. And so I had to fight with the French government, and I even went to Brussels at that time to try to get the authorization. So European Union was saying, yeah, you can produce wine, there's no problem. French government was saying that we have a Colbert regulation. So it was before Napoleon regulation saying that you cannot really produce wine so it was kind of a little, and I was not prepared for politics. I was too young. And so I kind of give up at that point. And it's interesting because star lineup, when I was ready to stepped down for pushing, the business. I met a professor from UC Davis named Darcy Dornan, and he was in agritourism in UC Davis, and he was doing a study in the Caribbean island on agritourism, and he heard me on a local radio. I was doing an interview on the local radio because the people in Martinique were so proud to have the local grapes and the local vineyard just in the south in front of the most beautiful beach. And so I was doing an interview on the local radio, and he heard me. He was stuck in traffic in Fort-de-France, and he heard my story, and he said, "Oh my God, I really need to meet Sébastien," because I was opening the vineyard for tourism and to explain what I was doing. And then because he was doing agritourism, he said, "Oh, that fit with my study." And so he contacted me, and he says, lucky he was speaking French because my English was very poor still at that time. And he came to me, and he explained to me what UC Davis was and what it was doing, and I explained my life, and we became good friends. And at that point, he said, "Oh my God, you should come to Sonoma and Napa." And I was like, "Oh, come on, Darcy, I don't speak English. What do you want me to do there?" And he said, "But at least to visit." I said, "Come on." And so at that point, I took my courage, but America was such a big country. I was so, I would say, scared to come here. And so I got an airplane ticket, and I flew to San Francisco for the first time in this continent. And Darcy picked me up with his pickup truck and a bottle of Coca-Cola. And he said, "Welcome to America." And I thought that was the most funny thing ever, So I was on a pickup truck in San Francisco drinking a can of Coca-Cola, and he told me, he said, "Well, I just want to tell you the truth. I was able to build your resume in English, and I spread your resume to different wineries in Sonoma and Napa Valley, because I really think that you are a great, experienced winemaker, and then you should be in this continent. You should be in the U.S. You should be you can bring something here." So I didn't know, but he lined up some interview for me. And my English, I didn't speak English, so I felt like very intimidated, I would say, to go to interview with no English. And then he gave my resume to different wineries. I got 5 or 6 interviews that week. And he even put a translator for me, Matthew, who was a student in winemaking, who speaks French very well. I still see him time to time. And one of the interviews was with Steve Letson in Sonoma Valley. And Steve, really, I would never thank him enough. Even though we don't speak much, he offered me the chance, the dream for me to come to California to make wine. So he took time to get my visa. However, he challenged me, he said, go back to Martinique or learn English, and when you speak English, I will give you the visa, because you can bring a lot to the valley. And so I went back, I hired a teacher, and then I learned English 4 hours a day. And I met a lot of American people who were selling in the selling community in Martinique. And then lucky, Mary Montgomery was in school with Steve Letson, and she was here selling the Caribbean island. And then she said, "Oh my God, I can teach you English as well." And one day she called Steve Letson and said, with who I am, I'm with Sébastien Marquet. He's learning English very fast. You need to, respect your word. And one day I got a phone call. I was in my house, and I say, "Hello, it's Steve Letson. Sébastien, how are you doing?" And I answer his questions, and he said, "Okay, you're ready to come to the United States?" And then he signed my visa, and I came to Sonoma to be a winemaker at Letson Winery. And I stayed with Steve, for 3-4 years. And sadly, I was young. I should have stuck with Steve Letson a little longer. I kind of regret I did a move. I don't regret that move, but it's still here. I should have maybe stick with him a little bit. So anyway, career didn't end there, but that was an incredible experience to be in Sonoma Valley. And Steve gave me the complete responsibility of his vineyard and his winemaking. So I was producing a lot of different type of wine for him, because this program was very incredible. All vines in Linfield from Dry Creek Valley and from everywhere. So it was fascinating program with grapes and Zinfandel. I fell in love with Zinfandel because I didn't know Zinfandel from France, from anywhere. So that was a beautiful step up in my career making wine in California.
What year did you start in California?
2003.
What were your impressions of California, of America, of the wine and the grapes there? How did it compare to what you'd seen before?
Well, California is a big machine, and people are super professional. They are very detailed in their winemaking. They know what they like, and they're always pushing the limit of what is possible. In 2003, the weather was still, I would say more friendly than it is today with the fires, and so I had an incredible experience producing wine at that time there. And the winemaking community is very competitive. However, they work together. There's no wine industry without a tight community, and because you promote the region in the tourist. So I really enjoy my experience, and the grapes are bold and rich, and you have to. The weather conditions are the best, I would say, in the world. You have a very fertile soil, you have irrigation, you have no rain for all this month. If you don't make good wine there, you need to rethink your job. It is really, I think you have to understand for sure your terroir. You cannot be too excessive. I would say you have to be able to balance your winemaking style. You cannot do too much extraction, but you have to respect, what the soil gives to you and the weather. So now I've produced beautiful wine there, and I was very proud to work in the California wine industry.
Obviously, the industry here is different than in France. Obviously, a lot less regulation, a lot less sort of being told what to do. I'm curious about how that worked for you in terms of making decisions.
Yes, less regulation, I would say yes, but some regulation still. I think for sure if you're in Burgundy, you can plant a Syrah in Burgundy if you like. You will not be part of a AOC, that's it. So if somebody wanted to change things, and I think it will happen one day because the weather is not getting cooler, so maybe someday someone would decide to plant some Syrah. They've done that in Tuscany with, Sangiovese and the Cabernet Sauvignon. The Super Tuscan is one of the examples of people who have a desire to change the recipe. And the weather condition, getting warmer, harvesting earlier, Pinot Noir will still be the king grapes in Burgundy. However, conditions become a little bit more complicated today. So maybe one day Syrah will be there. Maybe the grapes varietal will shift north. And so Cabernet Sauvignon in Napa, in 2003 was still a lot of Sauvignon Blanc in the Napa Valley and different type of grapes. Today it's more Cab Sauv, all the Napa Valley. There's other grapes, but so I don't remember your question. I'm so sorry.
I was just sort of curious about adjusting to sort of having more freedom when it came to what to plant and how to.
So regulation. So you have regulation still. The blending regulation. I think is less restriction in terms of quality. Less quality control. But people in America are more business oriented. So nobody want to make a bad wine. So in France, for instance, when you want the appellation, you have to submit your wine. It's tested by the professional panel, and they will say, yeah, you are to the standard of our appellation. In America, we don't have that. However, nobody's going to make a bad wine and shoot himself in the foot. I think that was the old way in France. Even today, nobody's going to do that in France. You don't lie twice to a customer. Okay, so you have to be able to produce good wine from the get-go. So I think people are fully aware that the wine needs to be good. It's not acceptable today to make a bad wine in bottle. And you have a lot of tools to be able to correct if you have a bad wine, and you can always try to fix it with technology or blending. So it's not today even thinkable to bottle a bad wine. So the regulation in America are a little bit more flexible. They are still here to keep people on track and make sure that we don't poison people because we are alimentary product. But yeah, it's great. It's great to be able to work with 5, 6, 10, 15 different type of grapes in one region. For me, it was kind of I couldn't imagine seeing myself in Burgundy at that time when I was a young winemaker to just work with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and a little Aligoté, So I needed to go through this, journey to be able to work with different type of varietal. So that was for me fascinating. Then in Sonoma Valley, in Sonoma County, you can have a Pinot Noir from Carneros or the Sonoma Coast, and you can have a Chardonnay, you can have a Viognier, you can have every grapes you dream to work with, and Nebbiolo, and you are able to get all these grapes and make this different wine, and it's just fascinating, and with some freedom for sure for a Frenchman.
Tell me about the Sonoma County area in the early 2000s. What were your impressions?
It's gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. I love the Pacific Ocean, with oysters and Point Reyes. That is just breathtaking. It's beautiful. I love the gold hills, with green oak trees. With all gold in the summertime, and you have these green vineyards, dark green, who pop out of the hills, and when you drive in the Sonoma Valley, it's just breathtaking how beautiful it is, and the weather again is so incredible. I have these cool nights with the Pacific Ocean influences, and then you have these hot days where the grapes can ripe. So. Yes, it becomes a little hotter now in some month in August or September. You can have high temperature and the vine shut down a little bit, but with the magic of irrigation, you are able to maintain, the vine, correct, and then extend a little bit your maturity period. So now it's breathtaking, and the wineries are so gorgeous. Okay, people and the story behind. It's also very, the pioneer people, the Mondavi and the Gallo families who came at that time and starting to believe, that they can make better wine. And the history is very long behind. It's not just a new region. We know the Napa Valley in France since 1976, the competition of Paris, but they have planted vine there for a long time. When I worked for Steve Letson, I was pruning a vineyard. It was 110 years old. On 5th Street, East Sonoma there. So it's incredible, for me, young winemaker still coming to Napa Valley or Sonoma Valley and pruning 110 years old vines. It's the story is behind,
You had mentioned before that in France, Napa Valley was the only thing that was really known.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
So that is a great story because I was a young student. I have a professor of viticulture named Joël Durier, and I would never thank him enough. I just texted him a few days ago. Joël was a viticulture professor, and he taught me everything about viticulture. He was so good. With him and Pascal Fèvre, I practiced viticulture in the vineyard. Both of them, they were a great team. And he gave me the passion and the pruning and all the different technique of pruning. That was fascinating. And one day, it was before our final exam. He said, "Okay, guys, what do you want to do? You have your degree, And I say, I would love to go to Napa Valley. And because it's the only region that we know first. It was so fascinating. Since 1976, I was in school in 1986 to 89. We were talking a lot about Napa Valley and American wine. So for me, it always fascinated me to Napa Valley. This name sounds very attractive and always I wanted to go one day. So I told him, I said, Joël, I would love to go to Napa Valley to work the vines and make wine. And everybody laughed at me because my English was so poor. So everybody laughed at me, say, there's no way you're going to Napa Valley. You with your English, Sébastien, there's no way. So everybody laughed. I was laughing stock of the class that day. So I put my head down and said, yeah, maybe they're not wrong. But I proved them wrong.
So tell me about with Steve Letson. Tell me about the sort of the progression for you. You mentioned he put you in kind of control of winemaking and vineyards. Tell me about getting to know the space there and sort of progressing in your growth and understanding of the work there.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's a different era than it is today. You know, it's not a long time ago, but you know, it was no smartphone and no GPS or anything. So I bought the different county map. And they were very detailed. So I have a Sonoma County map and I have a Napa County map. Steve was buying grapes from Lodi to Boonville area, where he have a ranch, to the Sonoma coast and Russian River and Alexander Valley, and also the south of California as well. So I got this big pickup truck, and I got all my maps, and he gave me all the addresses of the different vineyards that I wanted me to maintain and manage and make sure that the growers doing, you know, the work the way I wanted to be done. So he really trusted my expertise, and then so here we are, you know, driving around on the map with on my knees and visiting the region and meeting these growers and double checking their pruning techniques and making sure that the crop was to a level and standard that I was wanted to be for producing the quality of the wine that I wanted to make. And so it was just an incredible challenge, and my English was still very poor at that time, so it was just an exercise, and people were so patient with me, with very, you know, English very fragile, I would say. But it was fascinating that people took the time, and I really, I was very welcome there. You know, I always felt that people were taking the time to answer my question, to make sure, to change the techniques that I wanted to change, and to change the pruning. I remember this older gentleman, Alo Paz in Dry Creek Valley, who completely let me the freedom to prune the vineyards the way I wanted to make sure that I reached the quality that I wanted to get. And so I was pruning the winter. I was pruning the vine myself because it was the easiest way for me to get what I wanted to get. And so we produced some incredible wine. And I was working at Napa Wine Company. It's a custom crush facility because Steve didn't have his facility at that time. And Chris Icoford, the head winemaker, was still there today. You know, was very also patient with me because, you know, I'd never worked with American custom crush facility, and then they are very organized, and the winemaker, you know, you have to put your work order in and request the work to be done for the next 24 hours. So it's a constant, you know, flow for them because they don't work with one guy, you know, they work with 60 different guys or 40 different winemakers. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot in terms of the mechanic of winery as well. You know, it's very different format than it is in France, where, you know, you have one man in charge and you organize your planning and your work and your schedule the way you want. There you are, you know, in a very dynamic industry with a lot of winemakers involved. So you learn from each other. And that was, I think, a great experience. And same thing, Chris Icoford was so patient with me because my English was very, very poor at that time still.
You just got to learn whining.
Exactly, wine English. Oh, and then so I got this book, Lexi Wine. It's a French book where you have all the translation English just for wine making. You know, that was, for me, my Bible. I always had that in my back pocket, you know, So that was a great.
You've talked about pruning multiple times. Obviously, you said pruning is where everything starts. So tell me about coming into those vineyards and being given the permission to say, "This is how I want things to be done." What were you changing it to? What were you looking for in pruning and in sort of general viticulture?
So pruning is always a long-term vision. You know, it's not like a one-year vision. It's not like I prune and I get this. No, it's always a couple of years vision. So you have to adapt your vineyard to be able to produce grapes in the next 2 or 3 years. What that says, that means when you position your cane or your spur on your trunk, you know, you need to have enough space between each spur to be able to have enough air between each cluster. when you select or keep a sucker, for instance, is a sucker will be in replacement of a cane who is not very productive anymore, or a cane who have some wood disease. When you position, a spur with a cane, you need to be able to always think that this spur will replace the cane in the future. So you want to make sure they are lined up with a row and not on the row who can be broke by the tractor or the guy work the vine. So it's a lot of thinking, and then when you prune, that become instinctive, because you get used to it. So you prune fast in the winter, and then you want to make sure that these vineyards are balanced, thinking then you have always to keep the vine lower possible. Okay, because if every year you leave a spur with higher and higher, in 10 years your vine can be 6 foot high. And the goal is to keep it in the wire and then low and line up with the row. So all these different pruning techniques and strategy need to be applied to reach the quality. You don't want to leave too many buds. In Burgundy, for instance, we know we have 10,000 vines an hectare. And they are planted every 3 foot, 3 foot by 3 foot. Okay, so we know then the cane need to carry 6 buds. And the spur 2 buds. So you have 8 buds per vines times 10,000 vines per acre, so 80,000 buds, per hectare. Sorry, not acre, hectare. So here we are. You have a very balanced, healthy crop that way. Okay, so that is really the way we should treat vines everywhere. If you have a cane with 6 foot long. Instead than a vine every 2 foot or 3 foot, you balance the crop that way. Okay, so it's everything balance. Okay, if you have a very strong vine and then you don't put enough buds, at this point it will be too much canopy and the cluster will not be balanced and the aromatics and phenolics will not be there. If you have a very skinny vines and then you start putting too many buds, at this point the vines will collapse because it's not enough. It's too much. You ask too much for what she can provide. So the same thing for us. If I put a 200 kilogram of sandbag on your back and I ask you to walk, you are walking maybe 10 foot and you will fail. But if I put, a 4 times 50 kilogram bag, but you will be able to carry these bags for a long time. And so it's exactly the same with the vines. You have to adjust the vigor with what they can carry. And that is the key of healthy vineyard for a long time.
So when you were looking at these vineyards and that you were working with in California, what were you seeing? How much change did you have to make?
So a lot, because this older gentleman was selling grape by the ton and he wanted to have a lot of tonnage. However, the wine was weak and not always to the standard that he could have get from this area in the Dry Creek Valley. So I offer them to kind of reduce the crop a little bit, not by just dropping fruit, but also changing the shape of the vine. It was a kind of a goblet pruning, but very tall. And at this point, the canopy was not very good, and the grapes were exposed to the sunlight and getting very sunburned, and that killed the aromatics. So what I told him is to prune the vine by half size and reform a little bit the shape of a goblet, because it was a vineyard without canopy, without a wire system, sorry. And so we had to cut the vines and then reshape the goblet system. And in 2 years, these vines were super healthy, and then we got incredible score with the wine, and the wine completely changed the characteristic, and then from there we were able to buy the tonnage, more, and that was the key. Like, we can buy the grapes more, it's no problem if they produce a good wine, but we are not going to buy more, in terms of price if the wine is not to the standard I wanted, because I really believe that the site was absolutely gorgeous, and Steve Letson as well. So we did a lot of work that way with the grower, with the owner of the land, who let us completely, manage the vineyard the way we wanted.
Aside from sort of pruning and that kind of management, tell me about what else do you look for in a vineyard in terms of soil, in terms of tilling, in terms of any of that kind of stuff? What else are you looking for, kind of an ideal vineyard?
I think it's a general impression first. When you come to a site, you fell in love or not. It's really simple. Sometimes you go to a site, they kind of calling you, and you look the soil, you look the exposure, you look the slope, you look the health of the vine. It's very when I drive my car in the valley, I can see immediately just driving by if this vineyard is healthy or this vineyard is not. Okay, and then you can see, some missing vine or some canopy who is not the way it should be, or the color is not, you really see that quickly. So when you go to a site and you see the shape of the vine, the wire system, the ground, what people have done to the ground as well, if you can see if the ground is healthy or not. And of that, the shape, I would say the wealth of the vine is the most important. If a 10 years old vine is already big like this, then it's too fertile and then it will not produce a good wine. Except if you want to produce a lot of bad wine, you can go for it. So it's a balance between struggling and being healthy. And then the vine can tell you immediately just looking at it. So this is what I'm looking for when I like all vine. I think all vine also very important. They produce less, but usually they are more aromatics, more deep, and the color also always very, very, obviously more intense. So less tonnage per acre, but always, better quality. And at one point it tilts, if it's too old, at one point it's not economically interesting. So at that point you have to take a decision to replant or.
So you mentioned earlier that you kind of regret not sticking with Steve Letson for a bit longer. So tell me about what came next for you.
Yeah, what came up next to me is more for family reason. I couldn't stay in Sonoma, I think, because I was married and went through a divorce. My ex-wife, decided to go back to Martinique with our son. And so that kind of broke my heart because I was in Sonoma and my son was 4,000 miles away. So how can, that cannot work for me. I cannot abandon him. So at that point, I had to decide what to do. So I tried to start a project in France because at that point it was direct flight from France to Martinique. But I was not ready. I don't want to go back to France. I'm like, no way. I like America. I wanted to stay in the United States. So at that point, I looked for another opportunity in the United States, and I found a position in Virginia on the East Coast. That was close to my son because they had direct flight every Thursday from Baltimore Airport to Martinique Island. So that kind of put me closer to him. It was still very challenging. However, I found this gorgeous winery named Duquesne Winery in the north of the Virginia area, 50 minutes from Washington, D.C. And I never imagined I would enjoy, making wine with this weather condition. But coming from Martinique, with my experience in tropical weather, I know I could handle the weather in Virginia, with no too much stress. So I found this family, the Bezacco family. They were Greek origin, they're still there. They're still at their farm. And they needed help because their vineyard was small. They have a big potential. The agritourism is big there because people drive from DC and they want to be at the country and enjoy, music and then drinking a glass of wine. So I transformed this little family winery in a very efficient business. He gave me the confidence and the trust to change his business to a serious winery. It was not a hobby winery, now it became like a business. So I flipped completely from a 0 club member. He turned to 2,000 club members in 1 year and a half. The wine, we got the best, Cabernet Franc, double gold in San Francisco Wine Chronicle. And we kind of built the name and reputation of the winery. And the winery quickly, parking lot became too small, so we had to invest and increase the size of the parking lot and the production site, and we planted more vineyard. So I planted, I don't know, 30 or 40 acres of vineyard for them, and I stick with them for 10 years. Not as a full-time employee. I was full-time general manager, winemaker for them for, I think, 6 or 7 years, but in the same time I wanted to do other things, so I started my consulting business. I met my second wife, Isabel, at that point, and started the consulting business. She helped me with the business in the marketing side and admin side, and I did all my journey in consulting. So what I did, I built a winery from scratch. Okay, I've been reached by a gentleman who wanted to buy a piece of land and started a winery. So I recommended the piece of land, I found the winery, I found the architect, and then we built winery from scratch, designing brands and labels and producing wine for people. So I met David Greenhill and helped David Greenhill to build a Greenhill winery in Middelburg, who became one of the most successful winery there in Virginia. Septenary Winery in Charlottesville area with Todd and Sarah Zimmerman. So all these people gave me the opportunity to bring my expertise to their businesses, and I guided them to the point where they felt comfortable enough that they can sell their own ship, and that was an incredible opportunity for me. So I did a lot of vineyard there. Bodzo family vineyard. I helped them to plant all the vineyard and help them to produce their first wine, and Greenhill, that became like an incredible club membership with like an absolutely gorgeous building and tasting room. Septenary Winery was really gorgeous on the estate. It's producing top class wine. So I did a consulting like that for now since 2011. Lost Creek Winery as well. Lost Creek Winery, I helped them to start and produce their first wine and help them with their club membership and winery design. And so it's more about, it's not only about the winemaking like we were talking earlier in the interview, is also, you can have a best wine if you don't know how to sell it, if you don't give an identity to your brand, it doesn't work. It's no good wine without a good story. So you have to have a story solid to be able to talk about your wine, and that make a brand successful.
Lots of questions about that, but I want to start by asking about the Virginia wine industry in general. Tell me about your initial impressions of it. What was being grown there? What was the quality? What was the sort of the reputation? What did you see as potential?
Well, the story is great because Thomas Jefferson was the first one to brought some France. He was in love with French wine. He was an ambassador there. I think he was one of the first ones to write in America about Burgundy wine, Romanée-Conti. He wrote something about Romanée-Conti. So the story behind is absolutely gorgeous. And he brought some vines, from France. He planted them on his estate. And what is interesting is he fell because he was not able to produce grapes by the fact that he didn't know about phylloxera. And he brought these vines from France, planted American soil, and boom, they died one after another because phylloxera was on the soil. And so that was a very, very big disappointment. But technically, he's the first one to have planted grapes in Virginia. And that is a story. Here we are. We have a story of a Virginia wine here. And what happened is from there he made some beer and very successful. So that is a great story. I went to his house. He's got on the side of his chimney, he's got a little rope like you can bring the bottle of wine directly from the wine cellar, and a little elevator. So that is show how passionate he was about his wine at the table. And after that, you have some leader who started to plant vines in Virginia. Lou Parker is one of them. You have some great success. The wine are considering that it's very challenging weather, people are able to produce some consistent wine quality and nothing to be ashamed of. They can be proud of what they accomplish. The weather helped him as well. You have a lot of French people there, Mathieu Finot at King Family, and you have Damien, and you have Benoit, who all work in the wine industry. You have some leaders, but you have a desire to do better. And when you have a desire to do good wine and better wine every year, you have a successful wine region. And today I think it's like, I don't know, almost 400 wineries. They are the number 5 or 6 in terms of wine tasting in the nation, number 12 in terms of state in production, or 11 or 12. And again, it's become like a winery destination. You know, you have the population of DC metro is so big, then people look for something to do on the weekend, and they drive and go to enjoy tasting rooms. And now I'm helping Otium Winery. Otium Winery is a beautiful family, Vijay and Anita Tanamala, who purchased that property 4 years ago. And we are planting a ton of sparkling grapes there because they want to develop some sparkling program. So I'm going there every 2 months, and then we are developing a new project there from Otium Solar with a lot of sparkling, ahead of us to produce.
Tell me about what the most common varietals are there.
So Viognier is one of the grapes I think that people talk a lot. I'm not always a fan of Viognier. I think kind of inconsistent sometimes. However, I know a lot of people think it is, and some people prove, then it's good every year. Maybe I was not that lucky. But Cabernet Franc is incredible grapes there. Cabernet Sauvignon doesn't ripe always properly because the season can be short. But Cabernet Franc is a thicker skin, and it can really give some absolutely beautiful black peppery aromatics. And you have some Merlot. I really believe in Merlot. It's not that cold resistant in the winter time, but I produce some incredible Merlot. And interesting, you have Gruner, Veltliner. Otium have some Gruner, and it's very consistently good. So Gruner, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, people are planting Tannat. So people are still experiencing, and that give an identity to the different tasting room, but the two main grapes, who lead the quality, I would say, is Cabernet Franc and the Viognier.
So your consulting, you mentioned, is kind of, I guess, sort of soup to nuts. Like you do you consult on the whole thing, on the whole project. Tell me about approaching something like that, and what you think the most important sort of foundation is. If someone's coming to you and saying, I want to buy some land, I want to start a project, what are the most important things for you to get across?
Well, first, it's a long-term industry, a long-term investment. If you think then you are going with a IT money, then you made quickly and then have a return on your investment very quickly, you are making a mistake. It's not the industry for you. But if you want to make a name to a piece of land and for generation to come, that is a place for you. So this is why I repeat everybody, it's going to be a slow process. Mistake cost a lot, and then they take a long time to correct. So it's where I bring my expertise to the equation. We have to understand what people want to do with their project. If they want to be on every store in a nation and gas station in a nation, we don't need to have a fancy piece of land for that. We can find a metallic building on a cheap piece of land and bring grapes from different areas, and we'll be able to develop a brand like this. I'm not saying it's going to be successful, but it's possible to try. But if you want to make high-end quality wine and be a renowned brand, at this point you have to find the right piece of land, the right location, find the right story, and take time to build on. So what I recommend is people to be prepared. It's going to be a long process with a long journey. However, it's no better accomplishment, it's a long-term investment. You plant a vineyard, it takes 3 or 4 years before you get the first grapes. If you want to make good wine, a red wine, it will take another 2 years from these grapes. So building a brand in the wine industry is 10, 15 years, minimum. You cannot just think then in 5 years you're going to be everywhere. People try, they fail. It takes a long time, and then the biggest I think the biggest challenge today in the Napa Valley is that is this very successful. Wealthy people who go to Napa Valley, they buy 5 ton or 10 ton of grapes at $10,000-$15,000 a ton. They make a wine, they sell the wine $300 a bottle, and they think that will be attractive. It's not going to be attractive. Okay, you can come as much money you want and make wine. It's not the reason why your wine will be attractive for $300 a bottle. There's no story behind that. Okay, so it's a really true story that people want to build for the people to share with the world, and it's the only way you can do it. So when people approach me and say, hey, so for instance, you have Sacha Lechine, is the founder of the Château d'Esclans in Provence. He's the most successful rosé producer in the world. He's in love with South California. He built one of the best rosé in the world. Okay, Garus is the best rosé in the world. Château d'Esclans is very incredible rosé. He put a team together to arrive to his success. He bought the property in 2006, and today they produce 5 or 6 different brands: the Beach, Palm, Whispering Angel, who is very popular in the United States, and Château d'Esclans, L'Éclan, and Garus, I think. So Sacha Lechine approached me and said, Sébastien, I would love to replicate, or to try to replicate a rosé project in the American Riviera, because his property is on the French Riviera near Saint-Tropez. And I would like to know if you can help me to do this. And I said, well, why not? We can maybe talk about it. He said, I would like to do an experimentation in Santa Barbara to see if we can replicate the quality of the rosé that we are producing in Provence. So he put me in touch with Bertrand Léon, his head winemaker, who is absolutely a gorgeous person. And they trusted me, say, go get some grapes in Santa Barbara area and then make some rosé wine. So I was in charge to go get some grapes, some Grenache, some Vermontino, and some Cinsault. And then this is what we did. So I went there, I bought, 10 tons of different grapes, and then we produced the wine, the methodology that Bertrand wanted to do. I brought my expertise, and I said, I think with the weather we could do this. He said, go for it. And we made a trial, just to make some rosé. And I blended the wine with Bertrand, and we went to show Sacha what we were able to do. And the rosé was phenomenal. Okay, so that kind of triggers Sacha. Say, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to do a rosé one day in this area or not? He didn't decide yet. The project is there. However, I was able to produce some rosé in the Santa Barbara area for him to think about the future, and see if he would be interested to develop something there. And projects like that are, for me, it's fabulous to be able to be involved with a project. It's seeding for him. It was a seed to see if something can happen in the future. I also work with another winery named Cardwell Hill Cellar, just here in Corvallis. They are very close to the coast. Dan Chappell is absolutely a beautiful person as well, and his wife Nancy. And he's producing great wine for a long time, but he approached me and said, how can I do better? Okay, so how can I make my wine a little better? And then, so this is what we're working together for the past 2 years to try to tweak his protocols, change his methodology, understand a little bit more the way he works. And we know it's going to be long process because every year are different. So what you do one year is not the same than you will do next year. So you need to adjust and adapt and everything. So, however, we are doing a great progress together to make his wine a little bit more appealing or more exciting, or wine he can be even more proud of. It's sometimes not about the customer, it's also what the owner, is. So this is what we're working on. And so it's it can be a big project of new vineyard planting like we do at Otium Cellar, or somebody want to tweak and make it look better, or a rosé project in Santa Barbara, or like a Washington State, a larger winery wanted to a Zirkel family for feathers. They have a sparkling program, so they wanted to assess the different vineyard block for sparkling production. So first job was to try to understand the different parcel, the different lot, the different block, and see what we can tweak to make better quality grapes for them to be able to do better sparkling with more control. And so I've been working with them for the past year on that project.
So interesting. I'm curious about, obviously you have kind of a philosophy about grape growing, about winemaking that is your definition. So I'm curious about, as you're being employed by these different people, how do you ensure flexibility? How do you make sure that, or how do you see different projects and make sure that this is the right thing for this place, this is the right thing for this place? How does it work in how do you define that, and how do you ensure that?
I think it's, the owner personalities, what their goals are, where they want to bring their project, will make this decision, and decision will be different depending the project, the personality of the owner. So at that point, you adjust your techniques and your. I know one thing is I always try to do the best in terms of quality, okay? Because even if it's a $12 bottle of wine, it needs to be a good $12 bottle of wine. So even if you buy very inexpensive grapes, it still needs to be the best $12 bottle of wine. So the techniques of winemaking, after that, you have to respect the cost of production for sure. You cannot just decide to a 12 bottle of wine. You are not going to buy the Bertrange barrels at $1,700 a barrel for sure. We know that it will not fit in the program. So you adjust. However, you have techniques that you will need to adjust and make sure that it's the best. So to answer your question, I would say depending on the personality of the owners, the project they want to accomplish, you will adjust, the techniques or what they need to do. And you cannot replicate, You can replicate the same recipe. That is the beauty of winemaking. Brewery is different. Beer making is different. If you apply the same recipe, you have the same product in the beer world. In the wine, you can apply the same recipe at 3 different locations that will never be the same product. And that is also what is exciting in the wine business.
So tell me about Oregon and how you ended up here.
So I work with Scott Lab in California as a applied consultant specialist with them. And one day they say, oh my God, we maybe have something interesting for you in the Willamette Valley. So I, drove here in Oregon. It was September. That is a big mistake. Never come in September in Oregon because you will stay. It's maybe not a mistake, but it's in December you will maybe regret. But September is gorgeous. It's the best weather ever. The hills, the valley, the forest, the ocean, Mount Hood, everything. So in September I came to 2018, and I really fell in love, I said, oh my God, it's great. And for me, coming from Burgundy, I ran away from Pinot Noir to experience different grapes. I had this long journey between, and now I'm like back with a Pinot Noir, so it's like a full circle, but still in the United States. And I enjoy, this is how I landed in Oregon. And so I work with Scott Lab a little bit. I work with Crush the Cellar, with a local store. They offer like winemaking product and equipment for the wine industry with Terry Sherwood, and it was great to know him, know the industry through the winemaking store, and slowly I started my consulting business. And after that, I've been approached by a French company who sell equipment, Bucher Vaslin. So they approached me and said, I would like you to consider to sell equipment in the Pacific Northwest. So it was just after COVID. my consulting was not very doing well because I couldn't travel. So at that point, I thought it was a great opportunity for me to work with wineries, with the equipment world as well. So I'm putting presses and distemmers and all this machinery in place for the Pacific Northwest. Plus, I'm able, and they let me do my consulting in parallel of that. So it's a good fit to be able to do the winemaking equipment and the consulting in same time, and that fit together. So that worked.
And you have your own brand as well.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
So in 2020, I decided to start making wine in Oregon, and so I signed a contract with a local winery in Dundee, and the fire happened. So I felt terrible, but I said, "There's no way I can start my brand in 2020 with this fire. It's like no good reason for me to." And it was small amount of grapes. I hate to break the contract, but it was no way I could invest that amount of money and not 100% sure that the wine's going to be good. And I work with grapes who have been smoked in 2017, 18, and in Napa and Sonoma. So I know the impact the smoke can be in the wine. And I'm like, there's no way I can launch my first wine ever under my name and be like smoky. So I canceled my contract and I say, okay. If you need to keep the down payment, keep the down payment. We can maybe renegotiate for next year. And at this point, he said, no, I'd rather give you the money back, and then we stay there, and we'll talk for next year if need to. And he increased his price so high. I'm like, for 2021, I'm like, no, I'm not going to start. Also, we've been broke. So what I did is I signed a grape contract with Bjornson Winery, Marquet, Patty Bjornson here in Eola Amity. And I started to produce wine at their location under my brand, Sébastien Marquet. So I started a website. I have a business partner on the East Coast, Eric Sinclair, and then what we do, we sell wine on the East Coast right now, Pinot Noir, and also in local restaurant here. I don't have a tasting room. So right now it's just online. I have a big follow-up because all these years in the US, I've been collecting name and email and contact, and so I have a big email list. I send email list every couple of months, and people buy wine online. So this is how I do my brand. And I'm supposed to go to the SAQ, Société d'Alcool Québec, to sell my wine in Canada, but right now,
maybe not.
So I was ready to sign. I was like close to sign the SAQ agreement, and they called me and said, well, maybe not, Sébastien. Canada buy around 6 or 7% of their wine is American wine. And right now it will be no wine sold in Canada for, I think, we'll see for a while. So it's kind of a bummer because I've been working on that deal for more than a year. So it is what it is. Yeah, brutal, yeah.
After all this time, what is it like making Pinot Noir? I really love Pinot Noir. I think it's one of the most beautiful grapes. It's so funny because I kind of run away because I wanted to experience other things. And today, you have to be precise with Pinot Noir. There's no mistake to be made. You really need to be sharp in your winemaking style. Is not much to extract. It's very delicate with very thin skin. You have to work hard for a short period of time to be able to produce the best wine. It's a balance. You cannot be excessive with your wood. You cannot be excessive with your timing. You have to be very precise. And mistakes show off immediately in Pinot Noir. You cannot cover much, so you have to really be on top of your game if you want to make a very high quality Pinot Noir and a consistent Pinot Noir. So I think I have a very precise style. My 2021, I just released that 8 months ago. The wine are, aging beautifully. I'm very proud of. So I didn't put much oak the first year. Just wanted to see the grapes, how that turned, feel a little bit again.
the Pinot Noir making with this type of weather condition. And 22, I increased a little bit my oak, and 23 a little bit. And so now I'm very happy with my recipe. And Bjornsson, Scott, the on-site winemaker, is doing all the topping every week, and everything's doing a great job. So the recipe work, and I'm very, very proud. Pinot Noir for me is like the full circle again, and it's such a delicate grapes, and the different clones are something we don't have in Burgundy. It's a massal selection in Burgundy, so you take this block and then you really don't blend. It's small area where you take this grape from one selection, and voila, it's not much you can do. Here you have a choice of different type of clone, the Pomar clone, the 115, the 777, and the 447. So you can blend these different things, so you can still do your recipe. So in my recipe, I have like 50% Pomar clone and around 25 777, and I have 15 115 and a little bit of 447. I do some old cluster as well. I give a little bit more body, a little bit more complexity. We should have a bottle now to taste it.
It's a new afternoon somewhere. You've made and sold a lot of wine for a lot of people for a long time. So what is it like having your name on a bottle and selling that?
So, and not only the label, I put my name. That is maybe egocentric, I don't know. But I wanted to do that for my grandfather, because my grandfather had been producing wine, in small village in Berry for a long time, and he never turned that into business or anything like this. But he was one of the leader of this industry in this village, and they started like a brotherhood. They call it like le chancellerie de l'abbaye de Molem. So they built like a brotherhood inside the village, and my grandfather was the number 2 member of that, brotherhood. And so you get a beautiful gold medal with his name on the back, and then it's the logo of the village, abbey. And in 2006, I went to Burgundy to visit my family with a group of friends, and the village did a celebration, and they intronized me to the brotherhood, and they gave me the medal from my grandfather. And so that became the logo on my label. So I'm proud to have a logo with my grandfather's medal, and I'm also super proud that it's Marquet name on the label, who I think carry the family name in the winemaking world through that project.
That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Obviously, you've worked you worked in a variety of regions, and you worked there for a long enough time to have a pretty good idea. So I'm curious how Oregon compares, how the wine industry here, the people, the wine quality, the sort of the consumer angle. How does Oregon compare to other places you've worked?
Oregon is super dynamic. It's known everywhere in the world, We're talking about Napa Valley for California, and I think behind, if you ask another wine region, it will be Willamette Valley. It's interesting because, Domaine Drouin, Joseph Drouin, family purchased some land here, Jadot with Resonance and others believe in this wine industry, even though I'm in the wine business for a long time, I didn't know all the detail of the different AVA and everything. I never came here before, so I didn't know the detail of the complexity of the different weather and the Venduzer, AVA, and all that. So I still learn today a lot about the different AVA, the different characteristics, the different family, the men behind. I was lucky to meet the Ponzi family, and it's great to see that you have leaders in this industry, like in California, who came here believing as a pioneer, and now this wine region is on the map. I see the dynamism. People are very dynamic. Winemakers get together, they share a lot of information. become also a little bit more competitive as well between the different brands. Even though the wine industry is a little challenged right now, for first time consumption dip a little bit. I think it's maybe a healthy dip, that will maybe clean a little bit, sadly. Some growers who not always do the best, going to maybe need to rethink the way they work. But the wine industry always be like this. If you ask a domaine drouin, they are a good example of people who have been through a lot. They went through a World War II, they went through a lot, but they're still here and solid. And so it's also great for us to rethink the industry. And I think Oregon is small enough to rethink quickly. So I'm very positive about the future of the wine industry. And the Oregon, it's, I think, great. The brands are like very impressive. The quality, Domaine Serene, Domaine Drouin, and smaller producer as well. Are like phenomenal in terms of quality.
You talked about sort of the challenges obviously being faced right now by the global alcohol industry and the local wine industry. Tell me about how you see the next few years. What do you see 5 years down the road for the Oregon wine industry specifically, but maybe just the national wine industry more generally?
Well, we have 2 or 3 years of inventory on hand. I think that is the leftover from COVID. The restaurant got hit so badly during COVID and nobody want inventory. The distributors don't want inventory. Nobody want inventory. So that kind of stick to the wineries now. Before, I would think then the distributor was taking a little bit more volume, the restaurant a little bit more volume, the wines. So now everything, nobody want to take a chance, take a risk. So every wineries have so much inventory on hand. So you have your bottle from 2022, you have 2021 for certain, or 2020 for others. And then now you have your bulk, you have your 2022 bulk, 2023 bulk, and you have 2024 bulk. And you see then the consumption don't absorb all this volume. So until this volume are, diluted somewhere, the industry is going to suffer. I will believe it will take 2 years or 3 years to absorb this volume. So we can tell, and people are going to produce less wine this year, maybe next year as well, kind of less production, and the big volume can move forward somewhere else. I remember in Bordeaux in 1990s that happened. They even did some distillation with this wine for the alcohol production or for even green energy like gasoline. Okay, so at least they do something with it. So yeah, I think it's going to be a little difficult. So hopefully consumers support the industry and come and still come to the tasting rooms and support the industry. We see that people are dynamic, they are rethinking as well, because we know the young generation are drinking less or not at all. So we have to readjust, readapt. We have to reach to these people. I really think it's also the wealth. You have the baby boomers who are not drinking that much anymore because of age and health situation. They also carry the wealth. When the baby boomers sadly will pass on, the wealth to the next generation, I really think that at this point maybe a student loan will be paid off, and then maybe people will have a little bit more capacity to buy a bottle of wine. It's not cheap. Wine is not cheap. In the United States, it's not cheap. So finding wine, a good wine at $45 minimum when you have your rent or your mortgage so high and your student loan to pay, and then it's maybe not the bottle of wine you go first, So, and another thing is, I see that clearly is a lot of people don't sit at the table anymore. Okay, it's also we have maybe to rethink. Then family before get together and have dinner together every night, or I was kind of surprised when I came to the United States. My son Arthur was a soccer player, and so they go to school at 6:30 in the morning. The bus pick them up. First in France, we don't go to school before 8. And so 6:30, the kids is still dark outside and the bus, and they go to school at lunchtime. They don't eat a little piece of pizza with no knife and no forks because it's dangerous. And at 3 o'clock they are back home, and the parents still work. So they open the fridge and eat junk food in the fridge. And then after that they have soccer. So they need to be drove to soccer at 3:40 or 4 p.m. And when they come home at 8 p.m., they just want to do homework quickly and go to bed. So there's no time for family time around the table during the week. It's a very intense schedule. So for me, it was like kind of shocking. You know, it's like, you know, it's, I think having a dinner at the table every night with your family or on the weekend with your friends is very important. A bottle of wine is a product of communion. You know, you share a bottle of wine with your best friend, with your, you know, with your, I don't know, your table. You know, this is how wine needs to be consumed. So I like the TV in America, you know, the woman or the man are cooking at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. and they open a bottle of wine and they pour a big glass of wine and drink the wine without cooking. In France, it doesn't exist either, you know. It's a very different way to consume the wine. But at the table is the best.
You mentioned earlier your other passion, sailing. Tell me about that and how the role that has played in your life.
Yeah, so I always wanted to, is why I left Burgundy as well. You know, it was different grapes, but I also wanted to be closer to the ocean. So Languedoc-Roussillon was great because the Mediterranean Sea was there. I was doing a lot of windsurfing when I was younger, so it was great to be in the Mediterranean Sea and go windsurfing. After that, I started learning sailing. So when I moved to Martinique, you know, island, that was the paradise for me. I had a vineyard, and I can grow and then sail on the weekend or with some friends. So I've always been on the sailboat. And later on, when I moved to Virginia, I bought a sailboat on the Chesapeake Bay there, a beautiful French Beneteau. And I was doing a lot of sailing on the Chesapeake Bay. So you know, nature, it's explore the world, and sailing is for me a passion that I have. It's challenge yourself with something else, the elements, the weather. We still talk about the weather and the elements and the you know, the outside elements. It's gorgeous. So in 2019, I quit everything. I needed to have a break and challenge myself with something else. So I took my sailboat from the Chesapeake Bay. And so the goal was to pass the Bay Bridge, Chesapeake Bay Bridge, and to pass the Golden Gate Bridge. So I did a 6 month off, and I sailed from the, you know, East Coast to the West Coast through the Panama Canal. So I did that with a friend, Joseph, and we did all the Bahamas Island, Jamaica, Colón, Panama, and went up Costa Rica, Mexico, Guatemala, and Guatemala, Mexico, and California. So that was a great journey just before moving to Oregon. And I kept my boat in the San Francisco Bay for a long time. So that is also something for me one day, you know, I see myself doing a circumnavigation, or that is on the bucket list. So after the wine journey, we will never end. You know, it will be maybe more sailing and a little bit more on the water and less on the earth.
That is an pretty incredible journey. Tell me about, you mentioned needing a stop, needing a break. Tell me about, I guess, sort of getting to that point and deciding that was the path you wanted to take.
Yes, you know, sometimes you sit back and you say, now what? Okay, and the now what for me, I've been very often in my career, you know, after 10 years, you know, 9 years in Martinique, now what? And you meet someone and that triggers something else. And I always stay long period. I never switched 2 years and move on. I never did that in my life. I always stay a long period of time. But after 10 years, I think it's always a rethinking. You get older, you have more experience, your body is also getting older, so you don't move the barrels anymore. You know, you physically it's become a bit more difficult, and you have young generation who want to do it, so let them do it. And they think they are going to rethink, like I think before I can rethink things. And it's great to see that you have people with more passion and more desire to change things or make a difference, and it's great, you have to let them do it. And so for me, you know, the now what is in 2019 was that moment. Okay, I was in the East Coast. I was doing a lot of consulting, East and West, and I moved west. And I said, okay, it's maybe time for me to stay now west again. My son was now west also, moved from the Caribbean island and moved to Los Angeles. And so I was like, okay, now I'm here in the West Coast. What do I want to do next? You know, so 2019 was that moment. And I couldn't decide if I wanted to go production or if I still wanted to do consulting. Consulting is great. It's very feeding you with new project, new people. It's great, but it's also a lot of work and people to deal with and different projects and personalities and you have to please everybody, you know, to make it work for them and for yourself as well. So at one point I'm like, I need to take a break from that. And the boat project was something great because I needed to challenge myself with different, you know, a mindset, learning to navigate out there, to make sure that the boat is safe for my crew and myself. So it was just like a new challenge. I needed to challenge myself with something new, you know, more personal, where I can read my book, where I can do what I wanted to do that I never have time to do. And that was the journey. And I was ready to come back after 6 months. I was okay, let's put the boat and at the dock and go back. And at this point I felt strong to come to Oregon. And now I'm on my another 10 years journey.
Before we move on from that, tell me one good story from your 6-month journey at sea.
I learned a lot. I learned about myself a lot. You know, I learned about fatigue, how to manage the fatigue. When you're out there, it's very scary sometimes, very peaceful sometimes. I have a story there on the Papagayos trade wind near Costa Rica, where we got like 50 nautical miles wind for almost 3 days. So that was the scariest moment, I think, in my entire life. You can count on yourself and nobody else because nobody's going to come rescue you. And it was only my friend Joseph and I. And it's so funny because it's the only night we had an argument together. In the morning, we didn't sleep for 48 hours. For sure, it would happen. But we laugh because say, you know, we had less fight together in 6 months than we'd have in our wife in 1 week. so not fight, but argumentation, I would say. But so now the beauty was that, you know, it's the journey. I think it was incredible to prepare you mentally, physically, to go through the challenges and learn yourself, and learn that you can push the limit. You can really leave something priceless, who will leave like a ink on you forever. You know, it was very impressive.
You talked about sort of that being on the bucket list still on a similar trip. What else are you looking ahead to? What have you not done yet that you want to do, or what are other future plans in or outside of wine?
I want to do more sailing. You know, I do a lot of fly fishing and I do a lot of outdoor activities. But I think sailing is the bucket list, and I want to do more. Right now, I'm looking if I want to invest on the sailboat again, or I know one thing is in 10 years I would like to maybe stop the, you know, the everyday work. I would still work, but maybe not like this, and take more time to challenge myself with sailing around the world or do some other destination. So that is really what I think, you know, on the target, my 10 years, you know, plan. That is really what I want to do, yeah.
How do you see your personal wine brand progressing?
First, I need to devote more time to see it progress because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of foot on the ground, knock the door, introduce the story to the people. So my goal will be at one point to focus with that 100%. You know, the wine brand consulting, maybe less equipment and less sales, but so yeah, that would be the goal. I'd say in the next 2 years, this is what I would like to be focused on, just entirely the brand.
Do you have a size in mind, or is there something that would make it a success for you?
Yeah. Yes, I do, but I always want more, so that is the problem, you know. I want to be able to sustain the quality. You know, if I see then the volume reach a level, then I cannot sustain the quality. At this point, I will stay there. You know.
All right. Last question for you. What has been your greatest accomplishment, or what is your proudest achievement so far?
My son. Yeah, I'm super proud of him. He lost his mom when he was 16 years old. He's, you know, fully engaged in life and the community, and he kept his smile, and I've been there for him since the beginning, and I'm super proud of him. And he went through a lot of challenges and difficulties, and that I'm, very, very. I think that is my biggest accomplishment.
All right. All the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover today that you were hoping to cover?
No, I think we cover a lot.
We did cover
you
a
know,
lot.
it's a lot of. I realize, you know, is when I talk with you about what I've done in my life, I realize it's a lot. It's not common, for sure. You know, a lot of traveling, different weather, different pattern, different land, different, you know. So yeah, it's been a great journey, and I'm only 52, so that means I have another long time in front of me. So no, I'm very. Sometimes I don't, you know, you live your life, you don't realize, you know, what you've been accomplishing. But I really think I have a great journey so far. So.
Absolutely agreed. Thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. Appreciate you telling your story, being part of our project. Go ahead and let you off the hook.
Well, thank you very much.